more in the
Semi-automatic
immediate vicinity of the bullet.
rifle or shotgun.
But for sure, gunshot primer residue will
accumulate on the
go,
firearm that's being
follow
used,
the discharge
Yes, sir, it will.
cartridge or
And if it's not
shell
properly
shot
cleaned and
as it opens
maintained,
up, right?
I mean, it'll stay there until
Yes, sir. Studies have
it gets
shown
wiped
as
off
far as
by
about
someone's
60
hand?
feet. Beyond that, they haven't been studied.
Okay. So within 60 feet of a gun being shot, there will be gunshot primer residue on whatever's around there. Fair enough?
Whatever's around the bullet, per se.
Okay.
When it gets out that far, it's more in the immediate vicinity of the bullet.
But for sure, gunshot primer residue will accumulate on the firearm that's being used, will it not?
Yes, sir, it will.
And if it's not properly cleaned and maintained, I mean, it'll stay there until it gets wiped off by someone's hand or left out in the rain or sprayed off, right?
Yes, sir, it will.
Okay. And when you were referring to transfer GSR, is that one of the things you're referring to?
Yes, sir. If you touch a gun that had been fired at any point, then you have the potential to transfer it to your hands.
Now, this jury has seen throughout the course of the trial a number of folks holding up some firearms that are in evidence. A couple of shotguns, 300 blackout, and they've seen they've seen witnesses hold up. Mr. Meadows held up yesterday this blue rain jacket, which you had identified having 38 particles or more on it. My question to you is it very possible that where you're sitting right now, there's gunshot primer residue?
That is a possibility, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you did you work in the Forensic Services Laboratory at SLED, correct?
Correct.
And there's a trace evidence operation manual pertaining to gunshot primer residue analysis, correct?
Yes, sir, there is.
And that governs you follow that manual, do you not?
Yes, I do.
And you agree with the statement that gunshot primer residue evidence is most probative in the following situations: from subjects who have not sustained a gunshot wound, from subjects who have not been in the proximity to the discharge of a firearm or admitted to discharging a firearm, and from subjects who were not found in the possession of a firearm.
I do agree with that, yes, sir.
And that's a statement of your operations manual.
Yes, sir, it is.
And you obtained clothing, which we know is from Richard Alexander Murdaugh, shirt, shorts, and shoes. And did someone under your supervision did lifts from those clothing items so that you could analyze the particles, correct?
Yes, sir. Jamie Hall collected the particle lifts off of those items.
And those and that collection was done on June 8th, I believe, was it not?
Yes, sir, it was.
And are you aware that the clothes were collected on June the 8th?
Yes, sir, I was.
And were you aware that when the clothes were collected, they were wet?
I didn't know that they were wet until Jamie opened up the evidence, and it was evident that the shirt was a little damp and the shoes were definitely damp.
And so it's just been a few hours that that they had been placed in some sort of bag, and you open it up and they're wet, and you smell laundry detergent.
That's correct.
Okay. Were you aware it had been raining that evening at Moselle?
I was not aware of that, no, sir.
In any event, you tested after Ms. Hall, is that it, Jamie Hall?
Yes, sir.
She did the lifts, and you located 3 particles from the white shirt.
Yes.
You were at 3 particles from the shorts.
Yes.
No particles from the shoes.
Yes.
And there was no particles on Mr. Murdaugh's hands.
There was one particle on his right hand.
I'm sorry, there was 1 particle on his hand. And you would agree that that amount of primer residue, gunshot primer residue found on an individual who you had been informed had a firearm in his hand when the police arrived, that it was consistent with the transfer from a firearm?
When I analyzed the evidence, I did not know that he had a firearm in his hand, but that would be consistent with somebody who had a firearm in his hand prior to collection.
Okay. Well, you learned that at least by June the 9th at 11:03 a.m. when you had a telephone call with Agent Owen, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you told him that that amount of gunshot residue would be consistent with the transfer from a firearm?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you stand by that here today?
I do.
Now, the seatbelt assembly, let's talk about that for a minute. You did lifts, you and Ms. Hall, or Agent Hall, did lifts of the buckle, is that right?
Yes, sir.
The latch plate, is that right?
Yes.
And then 3 spots along the belt, the webbing.
Yes, sir. 3 areas along the belt. We divided the belt into 3 sections and did both sides of it. And those were the 5 areas that we collected.
I see. So did you take lifts from the entire webbing?
Yes, sir. We retracted it as far as it would go, divided it into 3 sections.
I see.
And collected them.
And the results of the lifts, and you did analysis, was there's 1 particle on the buckle, right?
That's correct.
0 on the latch plate.
Correct.
0 on the belt, on any of the sections of the belt.
That's correct.
So the whole belt was 0. And so they found 1 particle.
I confirmed 1 particle on the buckle. Yes, sir.
And you can't say how or when the particle was deposited on the belt, can you?
I cannot.
And I think you told this to Agent Owen that if Alex Murdaugh was shooting earlier in the day or anytime, at some point in time while he had that vehicle, and he got after shooting, he got in the vehicle that has the ability to transfer any gunshot residue primer to that vehicle, right?
Yes, sir. I cannot tell you when that particle was deposited.
So if he had had that vehicle for 2 years and he'd been out shooting and got in it, that could have deposited 1 particle on the buckle, and it could stay there unless it got knocked off, right?
Yeah, unless it was cleaned, it could have stayed there. Yes, sir.
And if he went and got a gun and then put it in the car, and then he got back in the car and he got transferred GSR on him, and he could hit the buckle, and that could put it on there, right?
Yes, sir. That could have happened.
It's just very, very small. You can't see it with a naked eye, but it stays there forever unless it's moved.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, you were also asked to do an analysis of blue rain jacket. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir. I did.
And once again, just like the seatbelt, there's no way for you to know when the gunshot primer residue was deposited on the blue rain jacket.
That's correct.
It could be at any point in time from the date that blue rain jacket was manufactured, right?
Well, probably not on the manufacturer date unless they were firing
Right.
guns in the manufacturing plant, but any time after a consumer takes possession, probably.
So if a consumer took possession of that garment 4 years ago, and we're going to talk about how you can get gunshot primer residue on it, but unless it's cleaned off or washed off, it'll stay for 4 years.
It could, yes.
And you have no idea how gunshot primer residue ended up on that garment, correct?
I cannot tell you how it got there
Okay. Or when it got there.
or when it got there.
Or whether it was being worn when it got there, whether it was being worn inside out when it was deposited on there, or whether it was laid on top of a gun, for example.
I cannot tell you any of those scenarios.
Okay. So Mr. Randolph Murdaugh, are you aware that this rain jacket was found in a closet in September of 2021 at Mr. Randolph Murdaugh's home?
That was the information that was on the submission, yes.
And he died, I think, on June 10th, 2021. Were you aware of that?
I remember hearing news about it.
But if he, before he got into his truck, had taken off this poncho and flipped it over and threw it on the back seat of his truck where he kept his shotgun bow whoop, and it laid on top of this dirty old shotgun, it could have deposited 38 particles of gunshot primer residue, right?
If the shotgun was not clean, there is a potential for the transfer off of that shotgun, yes.
And if if Bo Whoop hadn't been cleaned in years, there would be
No objection. What's he saying?
Bo Whoop,
Bo Whoop.
B-O-W-H-O-O-P, the name of Mr. Randolph Murdaugh's shotgun. If that shotgun hadn't been cleaned in years, it'd be more likely you would get gunshot residue deposited on anything that came on top of it, right?
The transfer would be more likely, yes, sir.
Now, you also testified that 38 particles of gunshot primer residue was a significant amount. You
Yes,
remember
sir.
saying that?
Yes, sir.
So I guess then you would agree with me that one particle on the hand is an insignificant amount.
I can just say that it was present. I can't tell you that it's insignificant, it's just there.
Yet you can say 38 is significant.
Because it's much more than you would expect on an item that wasn't in the vicinity or didn't come into contact with an object with gunshot primer residue on it. One particle, I can't tell you when or how or it got there.
Well, would you agree with 3 particles on a shirt is an insignificant amount?
It's just 3 particles on a shirt, and it can be one of the 2 ways, or a combination of the 2 ways of being in the vicinity or transfer.
Yet you're comfortable saying 38 is significant, but you're not comfortable saying 1 is insignificant.
Insignificant implies that the evidence itself is insignificant, but it's a particle of gunshot primer residue. I'm not going to say that it's insignificant evidence.
Well, should you say 38 is significant, or do you say there's 38 particles on there?
Significant implying that it's a large amount, not that it's a small amount, but a large amount.
So is 3 a small amount?
Not in how many that we get normally. It's about average.
Okay. Now, in addition to the rain jacket, and I think that is item 173 in your lab, you were also provided a blue tarp, item 174. Do you remember receiving a blue tarp?
Yes, sir.
And after discussing the scenario presented by the witness with Captain Ryan Neal, you and he decided that there was no need to process the blue tarp seized from Almeida, correct?
Correct.
And are you aware that this witness was Shelley Smith?
I am now. I was not aware who the witness was at the time.
So in your conversation with Agent Ryan Neal, he says, don't worry about the tarp.
Objection to hearsay.
The objection is sustained.
After your conversation with Ryan Neal about what a witness had relayed to him, you, in consultation with Agent Neal, decided not to test the tarp.
That's correct. That was based on that the raincoat was balled up in a closet versus the tarp being folded in a container and in place in a location.
When you say balled up, what do you mean?
I wasn't there, so I don't know, but that was the information. It was haphazardly placed in the bottom of the closet.
Okay. If it had been folded and placed on top of some other items in the closet, would that have made a difference to you?
I'm not sure. That would have had to have been a discussion between the agents and my management.
Have you seen all the photos of the search warrant where it was found and how it was folded or not folded, balled or not balled?
I've seen one photo.
Okay. The one that's in evidence here?
I'm not sure.
You were informed from Agent Neal that, or you concluded that the supposition was that the firearm was in contact with the rain jacket, correct?
I'm sorry?
You documented that the supposition was that the firearm was in contact with the rain jacket.
They were trying to determine, I think, whether a firearm was in contact with the rain jacket, and that was a possibility given my results.
Okay. Now, you So, do you remember what you did with the blue tarp? You just put it in storage and it's never been taken out again, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I don't know what happened to the blue tarp.
Okay. Did you ever have any involvement with the blue tarp after it was presented to your evidence lab?
No, I did not.
The rain jacket do you know if fingerprints were taken off the rain jacket?
I don't know of any other analyses performed on the rain jacket.
Would you have been able to tell if there had been lifts for fingerprints when it came to you?
For gunshot primer residue evidence, the trace lab always gets it first because any other processes might remove the gunshot primer residue, so no other analyses would have taken place prior to ours.
The rain jacket was slated, I believe you testified, for further DNA analysis.
That was what was on the outside of the box, yes, sir.
And because of that, you and Agent Jamie Hall wore gloves and a gown and a mask, right?
We always wear gloves and the lab jacket, but the mask was added because of the DNA request.
Do you know the results of the DNA analysis?
I do not.
You were shown photos that were introduced in the evidence and of the rain jacket, and I just want to publish two more that were introduced in evidence. 438. Doug, can you put 438 on the screen, please? I think you had it. Now it's gone. There we go. Agent Fletcher, can you see that?
I can.
What's that?
This is a page out of my case file that I prepared for my technical reviewer and as part of my information to keep with me. It's a picture of the packaging, the paper bag that the rain jacket was included in, with the documentation on it, as well as the tag from the rain jacket labeling the brand of it, the size of it, and it also has our lab net information and the initials and date in which it was analyzed by the trace department.
Okay, now the bottom of this, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a date of 10/8/2021. Is that when you took the photo?
No, sir, that's when I prepared the PowerPoint for inclusion in my case file.
I see. Okay. So Doug, if you'll go to the next exhibit, 439, please. And there you've labeled manufacturer's tags. You see that?
Yes, sir.
You tell the jury what size this rain jacket is.
It's a large.
Okay. And do you know this brand name? Colleton?
I had to look it up. I wasn't familiar with it prior to this case.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Doug. Can you take that down, please? One second, Your Honor, please. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Good morning.
Mr. Griffin asked you about 38 particles on the parka, poncho, rain jacket, the blue garment.
Yes, sir.
You asked about the 38 particles. That's what I'm responding to.
Yeah, we just can't hear you.
Okay, well, I'll talk louder, sorry. Actually, how many particles were on the garment?
In total, there were 52 particles. There were 14 that I confirmed on the outside of the rain jacket, and there were 38 on the interior of the rain jacket.
And I confused myself yesterday. There were 13 particle lifts and 12 particle lifts, correct? And then out of that, you found the 52 particle characteristics of gunshot primer residue, correct?
That's correct.
And 38 of those were on the inside?
Yes, sir.
That's what he asked you about. 14 were on the outside.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you wear that garment, do you typically wear it inside's inside? Is that what it means?
I would think so.
Yeah. And he asked you, is it a possibility that a firearm had come in contact with the rain jacket, and you said it's possible, it's really possible, isn't it? I mean, those numbers are unusual, aren't they? 38.
For the interior of a garment, I would think that they were unusual, yes.
And that's common sense, isn't it?
Well, they're just not,
What is, I'm sorry. How do you describe that in your world, everyday living and in your examining it? How do you describe those particles inside of a garment that you're supposed to wear with the outside?
well, typically people wear their clothing right side out. And so if they're in the vicinity to the discharge of a shooting, that's where the particles are going to land.
On the outside?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Griffin asked you about, I think, a hypothetical if his father's gun had laid on it and it was in a truck, would the 38 particles inside of the rain jacket be consistent
did you find?
It primarily the Bluetooth address of the connecting device.
Did it provide you any information of when a device may have been connected to the infotainment center?
No, there was no timestamps with that data.
Okay. All right. But there's another thing, another type of data you found on this infotainment center, correct?
Yes, we additionally looked for vehicle information regarding the state of the vehicle.
Okay. Explain to the jury, what does that mean?
So what we were looking for on this car was something to show if the car was moving, if doors were opened or closed, windows up and down. We searched for this type of data on this vehicle.
Okay. And did you find some of that data?
We did. We found what we call states of the vehicle, and in this case, it was more granular things, such as, in one of the ones we're interested in looking at is the shift lever going in and out of park, kind of giving an indication.
And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but
Okay.
Would you say that there was a lot of this vehicle status data that was
Yes,
stored?
this vehicle stores a voluminous amount of data in some logs.
And is the majority of it really useful when you
No.
try to okay. Did you attempt to pare down the data you're looking at to find potentially useful information?
Yes, we combed through the data and we looked for data that matched our testing of a similar vehicle or identical type vehicle to be able to identify messages in this log that can be attributed to the vehicle states.
Well, let's talk about that. You mentioned it. You said testing. What do you mean by testing? What did you guys do to test this?
We obtained a identical 2021 Suburban vehicle with the same build out.
Okay.
And we drove it multiple times and extracted data from it multiple times in a series of tests designed to try to understand what is going on inside the system.
Okay. So this is simple testing. So you go out and drive it, and you'd record, you knew when you were driving, so you could record times,
We
correct?
record times, locations, yes,
And then you could go back in and pull that data off the infotainment center of the test vehicle, correct?
that's correct.
And then you can compare that to the logs that you guys wrote saying we did this at this time, correct?
That's correct.
And you what could you do with that comparison? What did that help you with?
So that helped us identify in the logs laid out states, very granular states of
When you
the
say
system.
granular, and I apologize
Okay.
when I stop you, but I want to make sure, we understand everything you're saying. When you say granular, what do you mean by that? What does that mean?
I'll explain a few of the states to give you an example.
Okay.
When the vehicle first, say you open the door and you see the screen turn on the car, that would be maybe one or two of the states that the system tells me it's waking up, a message saying it's waking up, then a message saying I'm showing my animation video on the screen as it starts to boot up, and then eventually, like, if the car is being, and then other states of the car, such as the in and out of park, a lot of the states only mean something very small in the whole scheme of how the car is operating, at very specific little pieces of data.
Okay. And there's a lot of it, correct?
There's a lot of them.
And so you had to kind of figure out a way to kind of pare that data down into something that's useful for you to interpret, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And how did you do that?
Initially, we wrote a utility into our parser that would go through, first of all, and select all the messages we found of interest that indicated some sort of state of the vehicle. And then we attempted to take that data and put meaning to it. And it was a challenging process, let's put it that way.
But ultimately, do you feel like, at least for certain types of events, you're able to draw some conclusions about what was going on with the vehicle at certain times?
Certain events were much more specific about certain of the things that were going on with the car, and were clearer.
And when you were asked, the question of, can you use any of this information to determine when a vehicle could potentially be moving? Is that something that you looked for in this data?
We were looking for that data. We found something close to that data.
Okay. And in your testing and analysis, what did you determine would be the best indicator to you, looking at the data, of when the vehicle was moving?
The message indicating whether the car was in park or out of park.
Okay. And so you found a reliable indicator in your opinion, indicates the vehicle would likely or possibly be moving, correct?
That's correct.
Now, all you said was this particular message says it's either in park or out of park, correct?
That's all it says.
And it doesn't necessarily say whether it's in drive, correct?
That's right. I don't know what gear it's in.
Okay. But you can tell when it's out of park.
Correct.
And can you tell from that whether the vehicle is actually physically moving?
I cannot.
I am. And at the end of this analysis, did you prepare data and a parser report to send to SLED at the end of your analysis?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 443. I'm going to see if you recognize that.
Yes, this is a copy that I validated earlier today against the original evidence that was submitted.
So that contains the information you provided SLED, correct?
That's correct.
And generally speaking, what is contained on this CD?
It is the our unit's derivative evidence results of what was extracted and reported for both the OnStar module and the infotainment system.
Okay. All right. And so this provides both we said there's voluminous raw data that came out of this vehicle, correct?
Yes,
And it includes a full copy of that, right?
there is.
But also includes a report that kind of pares that down into more useful information to you, correct?
Yes.
And what did you call that report again? Was it the HTML report?
Oh, the format was in HTML, so you could open it with a browser, yes.
And what tool did you use to help you prepare that condensed report?
That was the parsing tool that developed that.
And that's what you talked to about at the beginning of your testimony with the jury, and that's a way to use software to help pare down the data into something useful, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. At this time, state would move to enter Exhibit 443.
No objection.
Submitted.
I'm going to show you it's been marked as Exhibit 449, and just describe what that is to the jury, please.
Okay, this is a spreadsheet that basically shows many of the states of the vehicle that we were looking at in testing the test and running our tests on the test vehicle. This is an analysis of the states that were on there, and this is what we were using to develop the understanding of what these states meant.
Okay. And so what would be a shorter way to describe that, a more simple way to describe that?
It's an analysis of this state machine,
Okay. Would it
of the
be,
state vehicle states.
okay. It would be, this would represent some of the research that you and your team.
That is research. Yeah, that's a research document.
Okay. At this time, state would move Exhibit 449
No objection.
into.
Submitted.
All right. And we talked about call logs, and you found some call logs, correct?
Yes.
On this vehicle. And where did those call logs come from again?
They were stored within the infotainment system
And where did the infotainment system get them?
from an attached phone.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 446. And let me see if you recognize that document and where it's from.
Yes, these were call logs that we recovered off the infotainment system.
Okay. And those are two specific calls, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And what are the date and time of those two calls?
The first one, June 7th, 2021 at 22:06:14,
And what was the number dialed on that one?
9111.
Okay, 3 ones. Okay.
And then another one shortly thereafter at 22:06:18, a couple seconds later, for just 911.
And in your research and testing, can you determine of when these call logs would have been pulled off the phone that made these calls?
No, at some point, the system would have downloaded that information from the phone. I don't know what time that occurred.
Okay, all right. And at this time, I would move Exhibit 446.
No objection.
Submitted.
All right. All right, and I'm going to show you what I believe is our last document. And this is Exhibit 442, and I'm going to ask if you recognize this document.
Yes.
And what is that document?
I've titled this document the 2021 Chevy Suburban Log File Excerpts from June 7th, 2021.
All right. And is this a condensed version of data from that original, that CD that we showed you a minute ago?
Yes.
Okay. And what is that condensed to? Why did you condense it to that particular data for this particular printout?
This spreadsheet was the data that our parsing tool was looking for amongst all the log files and extracting those out.
We talked about this a minute ago, but if you're trying to determine when this vehicle moved, you identified a key indicator when the vehicle may have possibly moved, you identified a key indicator in that data that would indicate to you, in your opinion, that the vehicle could have possibly been moving, correct?
That's correct.
And
In or
what-
out of park.
Okay. And when you produced that report, did you color code certain columns?
Yes,
The rows?
I hand-colored the columns on here that indicated those for clarity.
And I think I meant to say rows because they're horizontal.
rows,
correct?
yes.
My apologies. And you color coded certain ones, right?
That's correct.
Okay. At this time, statement moved to enter exhibit 442.
No objection.
It's admitted.
We're going to publish this. And I'll need the computer, please. Yeah. It's got to boot up. My apologies. Okay. So we'll keep moving. I'm going to need that exhibit back, please. And we're going to switch to Elmo. Once we get the computer going, it'll give a better view, but for the moment, we'll look at the Elmo. Okay. Can you read that document on your screen, Mr. Forecast?
I think I could read that.
Okay. So let's just start at the top. And I think you read the title, this 2021 Chevy Suburban log files, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then we see a row below that that looks like descriptors, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, let's just start on the left. Let's explain what these mean. And we see on the far left it says line and then a number symbol or hashtag. What does that mean?
Okay, I'm going to explain that using the next column over file name first. The file name indicates the particular log file that the data was recovered from. There was numbered log files in the system. And for this date, there were 2 different log files that contain this data. And the line number indicates the physical or the actual line number starting from 1 at the top that data was located on.
Okay. And then we see the date next to that. And what is that again, specifically, that date and time?
That is the timestamp of the actual log entry.
All right. Let's switch to the computer, please. And this will make this a little bit easier to see, hopefully. Well, if I can get to... Okay, and I think I'm at the top. All right, can you still, is that a little better for you to see? Mr.
I can
Papa?
see it fine.
Okay. All right, it looks like somehow I managed to mess up the spreadsheet. My apologies. All right, so event type. What does event type mean?
Basically, the event type is a part of the log entry that describes what sort of event is going on. It describes the event.
Okay. Event description, what does that mean?
It's just a longer, more verbose version of the event type.
And event value, what does that mean?
That is the actual value of the event, rather than this is the event and this is what its value is.
Okay. When you say value, what do you mean by that?
It can be a 1, a 0, a true, a false, or a textual indicator of the system state.
All right. And you say 1 or 0, true or false. You mentioned a while ago that data is always binary, right?
Yes,
And binary is always 1 or 0, correct?
in case a lot of these are 1 and 0.
Okay. And that's how data is typically stored in computer systems,
Typically,
correct?
yeah.
Okay. All right. So finally, on the far right, it says raw line from service log file. What does that mean?
That is the actual line from the file copied verbatim.
Okay. And so that's the actual data log that you pulled out of the system.
That is correct.
Okay. And it includes a timestamp as well, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Okay, so let's just look at the top here. And you said you added in some color coding, correct?
That's correct.
And the top line appears to be red. That's 83, 84, correct?
Yes,
And 86, 76 is also red, correct?
that's correct.
All right. why did you color code those red? What is that?
Those were basically messages that were showing the system starting up. The computer for the infotainment system initiated a boot sequence.
All right. And did your testing identify a number of ways the system on this vehicle could start up?
We observed it starting up with several ways.
Okay.
I don't think we know all the ways it may start up.
Okay, well, what are some of the ways you observed that it could start up?
Just things such as opening the door of the vehicle or getting in the vehicle and turning it on.
Okay. And when we say system startup, we mean the infotainment center.
This is referring to the infotainment center, not the whole vehicle.
Okay, so it's not necessarily we're turning the vehicle on every time we see a red color there, correct?
That's correct, just the infotainment
It
system.
could be someone just opening the door, correct?
Yep,
All right. And that represents, in some cases, where the screen in that car just kind of lights up if the door opens or for another reason, correct?
that would be an indicator, yes.
And are there certain occasions where the system can kind of start up on its own?
There's some unexplained times when the system seems to initiate a boot for no apparent reason. It's theoretical on what the car is doing at that point.
Okay. All right. And then below that, at line 9142 and 9144, it looks like you color-coded those two lines as blue, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And why did you color-code those lines as blue?
Those indicated these vehicle parked message that we found to be very useful in determining potentially the car moving.
Okay. And this is something that you found in your testing and analysis, correct?
That's correct.
That was reliable?
This is a reliable message.
All right. And it reliably means what?
It reliably tells you whether the car was shifted into park or shifted out of park.
Okay. All right. And looks like lines 9142 and 9144 both occurred at 12/21/43 on June 7th of 2021. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And is that local time?
That is local time.
All right. And what does that mean? What does vehicle parked true mean?
Vehicle park true means the shift lever of the vehicle was placed into the park position.
Okay. So the vehicle was shifted into park.
That's correct.
All right. And I see it looks like the exact same message on both lines, correct?
That's correct.
Why do we have the exact same message on both lines?
If you take a look, scroll to the right on the one that's showing the raw values, you'll see that the messages are not identical. They're from two pieces of the subsystem reporting the same event.
Okay. So this particular log and maybe some other ones get recorded in different places on this infotainment center.
There's a lot of duplication of messages.
Okay. And they don't, if they had the same timestamp, how would you interpret that if you see duplicate messages with the exact same timestamp?
I would typically consider that just a single event.
Okay, and so let's look down below that, and I see multiple things happening, and I'm highlighting it, on lines 9148 to 9156 at 12:33 and 23 seconds, and I see a number of things happen there with the same timestamp, correct?
That's correct.
And in your analysis, in your opinion, when you see a group of messages happening at the same time, what's the best way to interpret that information?
You have to kind of take a look at them as an aggregate.
Okay. And so you kind of look at all these messages as a whole to interpret what they mean, correct?
That's correct.
Rather than each one individually.
That's correct.
Okay. So let's look at it. Looking at lines 9148 and all those lines that are timestamped identically, which goes down to line 9159, what does that group of messages, in your opinion, mean was happening on this vehicle at that time on June 7th of 2021?
It looked like the infotainment computer was beginning a power down sequence.
Okay. Okay, and we go down to 1242, and we see a few lines in 9167, 9459, and 9716. We see a few of those red color-coded lines, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and again, what does that mean? Why are those coded that way?
The infotainment system initiated a boot up sequence starting up.
Okay, but any number of reasons of why that would have potentially booted up at that time.
Yeah, it could be a number of reasons.
Okay. All right, but then at 9954 and 9956, we see some blue color-coded messages, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and what do those mean? It says vehicle parked false. What does that mean?
Vehicle parked false means the car was shifted out of park.
Okay, and that's at what time?
18:23:57,
All right, help us out. What's that in civilian time?
6:23:57
PM?
p.m.
On what date?
on June 7th, 2021.
And again, we see,
Puppy poops, doggy doody, stinkers, whatever you call them, you know you don't want to scoop it.
okay, and we see a few things happen. Looks like 1853 and 1911, some of those red color coded. What's your interpretation for lines? Looks like 396 and 984 on June 7th there. What's going on in those lines?
It's another infotainment system boot up, a startup sequence.
Okay. And then we see another red event at 2103:44, correct?
Yes,
And what is that?
another boot up sequence.
Okay. And from any number of reasons, correct?
Correct.
Could be if someone just opened a car door, correct?
Yes.
And then we see a group of messages, looks like a few at 2104:05, and then a few at 2104:18, quite a few more at 2104:18, and that's 9:04 p.m., correct?
That is correct.
All right, and that group of messages at 9:04:18 p.m., what, in the aggregate, what is that telling you is going on with this vehicle at that time?
One moment.
I have the times highlighted there.
Yeah, at the 21:04:18, those ones looked like the system was, but prior to that, it seemed to be shutting down, and then it stopped and started coming back up.
Okay, and so it seems to be starting up around 21:04:18, correct?
Yes,
And that'd be consistent with that red coded message we saw a second ago, correct?
yes,
And it's also consistent with the red coded message at line 1281 at 21:05:56, correct?
what do you mean by consistent with that message?
I'm sorry. Take a look at line 1281. You see that?
Yes, I see 1281. That's the next system startup message.
Okay, and what time is that again?
21:05:56.
All right, and I'm gonna do my best, and I'll try to stop you. Let's try to talk in local time.
Okay,
Or
yeah.
civilian time, excuse me.
I'll start processing it that way.
And I make that mistake too. What time is that in civilian time?
That would be 9:05:56
PM
p.m.
on June 7th?
On June
2021?
7th.
Okay.
2021.
Okay, and then below that, we see a group of messages starting at line 1557, and they have an identical time state of what?
9:06 and 44 seconds.
Okay. PM?
p.m.
All right, and what is that group of messages telling you at that time?
That looks like the vehicle system is continuing its power-up process.
Okay. All right, and then we see a series of messages that all occur within 2 or 3 seconds, starting at line 1591 at 9:06:48 p.m., and then continuing on through 9:06:49 p.m., and quite a few at 9:06:49 p.m., and then into 9:06:50 p.m., and that's lines roughly 1628 down to 1654. What did that group of messages tell you is occurring?
So at that point, partway through those message sets, it actually has an engine running event, so the car has been turned on.
Okay, so in your opinion, the vehicle is running at approximately 9:06:49 to 9:06:50 p.m.?
Yes,
Okay, on June 7th?
yes.
All right, and then we see at line 1670 and 1672, it looks like another couple of blue-colored messages, correct?
Yes.
And again, what are those blue-colored messages? What do they indicate to you?
The vehicle parked message.
All right, and it says vehicle parked false. What does that mean?
The vehicle was taken out of park.
Okay, the vehicle was taken out of park at 9:06 and 50 seconds, correct? PM?
Correct.
All right. On June 7th, correct?
Correct.
All right, and if we look at it on line 1672, the timestamp it has a slightly different color stamp. I don't know if is that viewable on your screen? Yeah. It looks like it's colored more green, correct?
That is correct.
Why did you color that particular block green at line 1672?
I was highlighting events where you could see where the vehicle was taken out of park, and it looks like it was continually used and then put back into park.
Okay. And so, first of all, those two lines at 1670 and 1672, they represent the same event?
They are the same event.
Okay, and that's the vehicle taken out of park, correct?
That's correct.
And you color-coded that green because you wanted to find when the vehicle was put back into park, correct?
Correct. I want to find, yes,
Okay. Because you, in your opinion and your analysis, you've determined that that message is pretty reliable and something we can rely upon to make a determination of when that vehicle could have been moving, correct?
correct.
Okay, so 9:06:50 PM, the vehicle is taken out of park. And then, let's go down the line, 1904, 1904, and we see another green stamp embedded in a blue line. You see that, sir?
Yes.
And what does that mean to you?
Well, it was the next event where the vehicle went back into park
Okay, so at what time is that?
at 9:22 and 45 seconds PM.
Vehicle's put back into park, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And in your opinion, could the vehicle have been moving between those two times?
Yes, it could have. I have no evidence of that.
Okay, all right. But the vehicle's out of park for that?
It is out of park.
Okay, and that's something, in your opinion, we can rely upon, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And roughly, I'm not going to ask you for exact seconds, roughly how much time passes between the vehicle taking out of park at line 1672 and put back into park at line 1904?
Approximately 16 minutes.
Okay. All right, and I'm going to scroll down. And I'm scroll down to line 3059 and 3061. And I see some more green colored blocks here, correct?
Yes.
All right, and what are those blocks? What information is contained in those blocks? What messages?
Again, it's the vehicle in or out of park messages.
Okay, and so, and what time is that? Those two messages at 3061?
3061 shows 9:43:05
PM?
PM,
And that's June 7th,
June
correct?
7th, 2021.
And
And
what-
then
And what, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but at that particular event, what happens with the vehicle?
the vehicle goes out of park.
Okay, and then at the next line below that, what's the time on that, the date time on that?
9:43 and 59 seconds, June 7th, 2021. That's PM.
Okay, and what happens with the vehicle?
It goes back into park.
Okay, and so roughly how much time passed between those two events?
It looks like just under a minute.
Okay. And you can't tell us where the vehicle actually moved during that time, correct?
No.
All right, all you can tell us was it was out of park for a little under a minute.
Yes.
All right, and not to put you on the spot, we'll go back up and look real quick. So that's at 9:43:05 PM, correct?
Correct.
Let's go back and look at the previous vehicle parked at 9:22:45 PM, and that's line 1904. That's when the vehicle had been placed in the park, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and let's just do some rough math. Do you have a pen? You can write it down if you need to. 9:22:45, the vehicle's in park.
Okay.
9:43:05, the vehicle is now back out of park, correct?
That's correct.
Roughly how much time passes between those two events?
Approximately 21 minutes.
All right, and so the vehicle is out of park for about a minute at lines 3061 and 3079. And then let's scroll down to line 3096 and 3310. What happens with the vehicle there?
The vehicle goes out of park
Okay, at what time?
at 9:44:54 seconds on June 7th, 2021. That's PM.
Okay. And then the next event below that, what occurs there?
Next event, the vehicle goes back into park at, that would be 10 o'clock and 36 seconds
Okay.
on June 7th, 2021, PM.
And those are color-coded green because they kind of represent a matching pair, correct?
That's correct.
Of when it went out and when it went back into park, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And roughly, how much time passes between those two events at 9:44 and 10 o'clock of the night of June 7th?
Approximately 16 minutes.
Okay. All right. And then let's go down to lines 3327 and 3328. And those are two more green colored events that represent that matching pair, correct?
That's correct.
Vehicle out of park and then vehicle in park, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And what are the times associated with those two events?
The vehicle goes out of park at 10:01 and 17 seconds on June 7th, 2021. It's PM. And it goes back into park at 10:01, 29 seconds on June 7th, 2021,
Okay.
PM.
And roughly speaking, how many seconds is that?
About 12 seconds.
Okay. Okay, let's go to just a few seconds later, lines 3336 and 3340. And we see another matching pair of these green messages, correct?
That's correct.
Out of park and then back into park, correct?
That's correct.
And what are the two times on that particular event?
The vehicle goes out of park at 10:01 and 30 seconds on June 7th, 2021. That's PM. And it goes back into park at 10:01 and 43 seconds, June 7th.
So maybe I can do the math this time. That's roughly about 13 seconds it's out of park?
That's correct.
Okay, and we see a whole bunch of messages again, that a group of messages starting at 22:04:44 and kind of going on until 10:04:44 p.m. and 10:04:47 p.m. We see another group of messages. What does that group of messages generally indicate to you in the aggregate? And that's this group I'll highlight.
Okay. 3 to 2, engine run false. It looks like the system is powering down.
Okay. Okay, and then we get down to lines 3464, and that shows another green color-coded pair of messages, correct?
That's correct.
And again, goes out of park and back into park, correct?
That's correct.
And what are the two times associated with those two messages at 3664 and 3682?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what
What's
are
the
those
question?
times?
Oh, what are the times? 10:04 and 49, it goes out of park. That's PM on June 7th, 2021. And it goes back into park at 10:05, 55 seconds PM, June 7th, 2021.
All right, and that's roughly more than a minute, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and then let's go down to lines 3490 and 3504. And we see another matching pair in out of park and then into park, correct?
That's correct.
And what are the times associated with those two
The vehicle goes out of park at 10, 11, and 45 seconds on June 7th, 2021 p.m. And then it goes back into park at 10, 12, and 38 seconds p.m., June 7th, 2021.
Okay. All right, and that's roughly just under a minute or so?
That's correct.
And we're almost to the end here. Okay, and then, we see another message. So first of all, we see some messages that are blue colored at 3506 through 3515. And why are those blue coded instead of green coded for you?
Those are more vehicle park messages, but they appear to be with the, basically duplications of the existing ones.
So that's just duplicate information, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then finally, at line 3521, we see the vehicle. What happens with the vehicle at that line?
Okay, it goes out of park at 10:13 and 39 seconds p.m. on June 7th, 2021.
Did you find a matching kind of pair as we've talked about for when the vehicle goes back into park? after
No.
that? All right,
No log message was present for that.
okay. Can you explain why that log message may not be present?
We found during the testing of our test vehicle that there are times when the system decides to temporarily stop recording message. The reason is not clear.
Okay. But you do see it come out of park at 10:13:39, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, and just to reiterate this, you're just telling us when this vehicle's in and out of park, correct?
That's correct.
Because that's the most reliable piece of information you've been able to deem from this data, correct?
That's correct.
And you can't tell us necessarily where the vehicle's moving, correct?
That's correct.
And you can't tell us if it's moving, or if you see it go out of park, who's shifting the actual gear knob, can you?
No, we don't know who's in the car.
And all you can look at is this particular data, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And just so it's clear, you've determined, you're interpreting this data because you use a test vehicle to see when you see these messages, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And that's why you're giving us these opinions today, correct? From
That's
your
correct.
testing. All right. And when you were using your test vehicle, if you took a vehicle, if you took the vehicle out and drove it, took it out of park, drove it, and then put it back into park, would you find that exact same matching pair of in and out of park messages we just talked through? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you weren't able to determine any other data that would reliably tell you if it was moving or not, correct?
That's correct.
All right. But, so if the vehicle's driving and you see that, you would see that identical pair of messages like we just talked about.
Yes.
And however, if the car's just stopped and someone shifts it out of park and just sits there with their foot on the brake, and then sometime later puts it back into park, would you see that same matching pair of in park, out of park message and back into park message?
Yes.
You would, okay. All right. Not for mistake, this witness.
By the defense. Stand for a moment. right, back in order.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Hopefully this won't take long, just a few clarifying questions. First, you mentioned that the data was encrypted.
Yes, when we pulled the data off the chip, it was encrypted.
Is this something that's the manufacturer did?
Yes.
Okay. It's not something that the end user doesn't do something to encrypt the data, it comes that way?
Not for an infotainment system, no.
And so it sounded like you kind of had to reverse engineer with a test vehicle to figure out the meaning of stuff. Were you not able to get General Motors to assist with that?
We could, but we generally try to find the data on our own. Often we have it's difficult for us to get the manufacturers to work with us on that data.
Did anyone attempt to reach out to General Motors, say, to de-encrypt the data?
Not from EDAU.
I won't go over this spreadsheet too much. You still have the exhibit with you?
I have a copy.
Okay. And we didn't have a...
We can pull that. Laptop. Yes.
Is it up?
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you just briefly about, if I can find it on this. There were some things that were happening at 903. 903. 2103. Let me do it. I've got my phone on that. 904. I didn't quite understand, what do these mean? This group of things that say info state, sleep, then state, some abbreviation, animate, all these things happening in this 904, 905 range. What does that mean?
So as I was attempting to explain before, that some of these messages, like individually, they don't mean a whole lot. Like, what does this actually mean? But in this case, it's generally showing. Could you scroll down just a little bit more so I could see a few more of the messages? So it looks like initially, like at line number 984, where the system initially boots up, and then at 904.
Well, let me stop you there.
I'm
When
sorry.
you say system startup, what does that mean? What is the system and what is it doing when it starts up?
So this is just the computer for the infotainment center. This is not the entire vehicle, but something woke up that system. And just like your home computer, it needs to boot up before Windows is ready. It's a similar thing that has a boot up sequence. This is a log that says that was initiated.
Okay. And what would trigger this? What would make this startup happen?
We know that some events that make it happen, such as opening the door or just starting the car, we don't know all the events that might make that happen.
Well, on my Chevy, if you walk near it with the key fob, the lights come on the little door handles. You can stick your foot under the rear and the rear will come up. Would walking near it with the key fob trigger anything?
It's a possibility, but we did not investigate that.
But scrolling down here to 906 and 48 seconds, am I reading this correctly to say that the engine was turned on?
Can you scroll down just a little bit further? Keep going just a little bit more into the 49 second. So if you see that there was at one point there was messages such engine run false, which is only within the same second as a following up on engine running true. It's messages like this that get a little bit confusing on there, but ultimately it's basically saying here I'm at, but I'm moving to this state here. So in that case, it looked like the engine started running at this time.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'll belabor this spreadsheet anymore, but I did want to ask, did you additionally retrieve data related to the phone connecting to the entertainment system? I think there was the 911 call that you...
We had a call log that was extracted, as well as the connection of a Bluetooth, or several Bluetooth devices.
I'm going to hand you a printout. Is this a printout of device connection history that you were able to obtain from the vehicle?
We need to go back to the original material and take a look at this, because some of this looks more than like what we originally collected. There's pages of this here.
Right, it goes back way outside of sort of the time frame, but that's... I mean, can you identify this?
I mean, the format looks familiar, but it looks... I might have to go back into the original material and pull up the HTML report. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
And Your Honor, I think the witness is asking to look at his original data to validate what Mr. Barber has. State has no objection to that. Well, we'll just need a few minutes for him to validate it.
No objection, Your Honor, absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have you go to the jury room for a short break, hopefully.
now be seated.
If you bring the jury.
Your Honor, we're just copying a little bit of data, so we'll need maybe 2 or 3 more minutes.
We're going to bring the jury and let them watch you do that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to recess for the day and resume at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Please do not discuss the case.